Well, hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel and thanks for hanging out with me today. So today is going to be the start of the painting an RC body out of Lexan, so clear bodies. As far as painting hard bodies, maybe that's another one we'll get into a little bit later. There's a little bit different steps, but overall some of the basics here can be transferred over there. You know, prep work, planning out, all that stuff. You know, you're just painting the outside versus the inside, so there's a little bit of differences, but you know, a lot of painting all comes down to planning, prep work, and patience. Patience is a very key one. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first episode, which today is all going to be about planning and preparing to actually put paint on the body. You know, there's an awful lot of stuff that goes into it long before you pick up a rattle can and start shaking it. So obviously, first thing you need is a kit and a body. And technically, you just need a body, but having the kit built is my preferred way of doing it. You know, you can get the body fit, and, you know, most of the Lexan bodies nowadays have markers or little dents or something on the body indicating where it goes in relationship to the body posts. Some bodies you get have the holes already pre-cut all around the body. Some of them have the arches pre-cut. Some of them you will get a completely pre-cut body. You don't have to do anything. In this case, you have to do everything. The wheel arches are not cut. The body holes are not put in. Nothing is prepared. So before we get going on, you know, starting to put holes and cutting things out on this, what do you need to start first? So first is you need to plan. What is your body going to look like? Are you doing it box art? So for this body, I'm not sure. I'm still not 100% sure if this is going to be fully box art, or am I using part of the decal sheets and then some of the other decals that I have here to make somewhat of a custom body. So this is the Tamiya Subaru Nürburgring, I can't say that word, WRX STI version. So this one was intended to be an on-road car. So the German Nürburgring, this was built to run that. So this wasn't necessarily an off-road car. I'm probably going to make it into an off-road car. I've already built the chassis on the higher elevation, so it has a little bit more ground clearance. So it's not necessarily going to affect, you know, how the body is cut out and everything. I'm going to cut the body out to the recommended lines. It just may reflect on how high up the body sits, and it may reflect on how I go about actually painting and decaling the body. So normally this is a black bottom on the car, blue with a silver roof. So if I decide to go away from box art, you know, am I painting the roof silver still? Am I painting the bottom black? With a lot of Tamiya's on-road kits, your decals are the paint. So technically in this kit, you paint the roof silver, the body blue, and then you stick decals on for the most part. And there is a lot of decals in this sheet. So for this one, you have all the body graphics. Then you have all the black, the ground effects and trim work and all that stuff to cut out. You know, there's probably 100-ish stickers. Looks to be about 107 stickers total to decal this body up. Now, they look really, really good when you're done, but things around this bottom edge, especially on the front and the back, as it's, you know, hitting things and the grass is pulling at it, you know, those decals like to lift. When you have, there is a sharp edge down here along the ground effects where there's one sticker here and then there's another sticker that kind of sits on top. Those love to peel apart at the seams. So what I'm going to do is, regardless of if I'm using the kit decals or not, is I'm going to paint everything that's supposed to be black in the stickers around the bottom. I'm going to paint that on in paint. That way, if a decal does start lifting up, I'm going to still put the decals on because a lot of these have, you know, sponsor graphics down the side. So if I go box art, I'll still be putting those on. But if a decal starts lifting up, you know, it's not going to show blue through it. It's going to show black. And eventually, if it gets too tattered, you just peel it off and you still have a nice black surround down there. Same thing with the grill and the front end and the diffuser back here. You know, most of that will be painted black. So this does come with the window mask for the front, the rear, and the sides. I prefer these type of window masks because these you actually have to cut out the entire mask. And the reason I like those is you can peel up one little corner, get the window mask in there, get it set where you need, stick that corner, and then slowly peel off the backing and get that window mask down. The pre-cut masks, like come in the Kyosho kits and stuff like that, those can be very, very difficult to put on because basically you just have one big sticker that's pre-cut and you're trying to work from the inside of the body and line things up, and, you know, the curve of the body can sometimes, you know, you'll be doing this with it, trying to figure it out. So I do prefer Tamiya's where you have to cut them out yourself. It makes them a little bit easier. But we're going to get into whole painting and masking and all that in a little bit. So again, one, you need to kind of prepare and plan out what you need. What paints are you going to need? Look in the manual. If you're painting at box art, all the Tamiya ones have the colors in there that they recommend for it. If you got a Kyosho kit or something like that, you just kind of have to guess. Most of those, the older ones did have the paint codes in it, but you can't get those paints anymore. So you basically have to, you know, look on forums, see what other people have painted theirs, and see if you can find any recommendations. If not, you're just going to have to go in with a picture of the car and stand in front of your paint wall in your local hobby shop and figure out which one of the Tamiya paints or Traxxas paints or whatever comes the closest to that, pick that and go with it. So as part of your planning, you're going to, you know, envision what your car is going to look like. Are you, like I said, are you going box art? Or are you picking different colors? So write down what colors you want. You can always take a Sharpie and write on your body. So that is now going to be silver. The great thing is this has a protective film on there, so you can draw all over this thing as much as you want. And if you decide later that that's not going to be silver, get a little thing of alcohol wipes. Doesn't have to be the big wipes. It can be the little tiny square ones. You know, you can get them on Amazon and stuff, very cheap. But Sharpie, most permanent markers are alcohol based. So a quick wipe with a thing, and your Sharpie's all gone. Now you can do this on unprotected bodies as well. It wipes off a Lexan just as easily. The key thing with that is if you're using a fine tip Sharpie, just be careful of how hard you push on an unprotected body because the nib can scuff the body because it's so hard. And again, if you're doing it on a protected body, you may want to be careful just how hard you're pushing on it just to make sure you don't cut through that protective film. If you're doing windows and stuff like that, don't worry about it too much. But if you are painting or tracing out lines around the bottom, where you may cut through the film, you know, just be mindful if you do cut through that film, just put a little piece of tape over it just to make sure you don't get any overspray. Now we will cover how to get overspray off later. These work well for getting rid of overspray. Now that you kind of got an idea of what your body is going to look like, and I say idea because sometimes things change as the body gets painted. So the next thing I do, especially on a car like a TT02 where the tires and wheels will sit inside of the body, I will go ahead and get the body mounts cut out. Now to do that, I use a body reamer. And all this is a really, really sharp, pokey thing. Mine has 2 flutes, some have 3, some have 4. But essentially, you just find your hole and you just start working back and forth and spinning it around and around. And eventually the sharp tip will pierce the body and you slowly carve out a hole using those 2 sharp flutes on here to carve out a hole a little tiny bit bigger than your body post. You don't want them a lot bigger because your body is going to be shifting all around. So this is something that you can put a piece of tape on here to make a stop to figure out, okay, I need a 4mm hole. And you get your first hole set to 4mm, you put a little piece of tape on there, and that kind of creates a little depth stop for you to use. You can also use, if you don't have a body reamer, you can use a hobby knife. Again, you just find your hole and then just slowly start spinning it around. Now what that'll do is that will slowly drill a hole through the body and you will start basically grinding out a bigger hole. Now these have a tendency to kind of skip around and make a very jagged hole. So just take your time, and occasionally you may have to come in and cut out a tiny little lump in the hole to make it round again, but you can do it with a hobby knife. I did it for years, and you know, it works. You are probably going to mess up the tip of a blade occasionally. You know, the blade will snap, the tip will snap off. Buy hobby blades in big bolt packs. I get 100 of these. They last for 100 will last me 2 years probably. And that's with a lot of cutting out bodies and working on cars and doing things. And also have multiple hobby knives. These things are dirt cheap. You can get like a pack of 10 of them for like $6. You know, you can have one with a brand new blade in it for doing stuff like cutting out decals and intricate work, and one with a slightly duller blade for, you know, gouging into things. One other tool you're going to need is a pair of body scissors. Now, you can buy straight body scissors and you can buy curved body scissors. If you only have budget for one, get the curved body scissors. You can cut a decent straight line with body scissors. You know, I can come all the way across here and cut a very nice line. And we'll go over that exactly how to do that when we are cutting out the body. But body scissors are great. You can use, again, the hobby knife to do a score and snap. But again, we'll get into all that when we actually go to start cutting out the body. So before you cut anything in the body, before you cut this out, before you start punching holes in the body, make sure you can verify those are the holes, because some bodies will have 2 sets of holes depending on what chassis you're building. So this may have holes for a TT02 and it may have holes for a TT01, or you know, some other TA01 or something like that that this body was originally done for. So on this body, this actually has 4 mounting holes back here for a different style of wing. This wing actually goes into the back here, and there are 2 more dimples back here. So don't go ham and start just punching out holes all over your body. Refer to the manual, refer to your car, refer to the parts. That way you know exactly where every hole is going to go. And again, Sharpies. Hole, 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 hole. You know, doesn't have to be exact, but now I know there's 2 in the back, there's 2 up top, 2 in the front, 1 on each side, and that's pretty much all the holes I need to put in this body. And then I can get it on here and just verify to make sure that the wheel wells are perfect. So for the wheel arches and the cut lines on this, they are all marked into the body. Now be careful when you are cutting out bodies, because occasionally you will run into lines on there that are not cut lines. For instance, in this body, there is a seam line going across the hood and across the back of the car. Now, that's not meant to, you know, make for a faux hood or anything like that. This is actually made on a 3-piece form, because there are undercuts back here in the body and there are undercuts back up here in the front, to where when this is all very soft, pliable, hot Lexan, this gets dropped down onto a metal mold, and the table underneath of it vacuums all the air out from underneath of the Lexan and from the actual car itself. And what that does is it sticks all that Lexan tight down to the mold. Well, because this thing has undercuts, you can't pick it up anymore. So what they've done is they've made 3-piece molds. So this middle mold section is actually shaped somewhat like a pyramid. So it comes down and sits like this, and then this piece and this piece will actually slide in. So when it's ready to mold, it's in this perfect shape of a car. And then they draw it down, they get the Lexan hot, they draw it down, they suck all the air out, it forms to that mold perfectly. And very quickly, the Lexan gets rigid again because it cools off. And then that center part of the mold, because it's tapered, will drop down, and those front and back pieces will move in just enough to where they can come in and pick this up off of the mold. And then that 2 end pieces will pop back up, the center piece will pop back up, and then it's ready to be, you know, another sheet dropped on it and molded again. So that's why you'll see some of these crazy lines up in here. So you have to plan out as you're cutting. You know, on this one, it's very obvious. You know, it's right where the wheel arches are. But in some cases, like a buggy, it may fall into right near a, you know, a pivot point where you have to cut. So if you're not paying attention and you're just cutting, and all of a sudden you start following that seam line, you've wrecked your body. And that's where the fine line Sharpie comes in. You know, go around and you can make marks all the way around the cut lines with a fine tip black Sharpie. Damn it. And then I don't know if the camera can see it, but now there are lines there to where when you start cutting, you can easily see them. Again, most of the modern day ones are pretty easy to follow. If you start getting into stuff like reproduction bodies where the lines are a little bit fainter, a lot of times those will really need some, help figuring out where they go, because most of them are pretty good. They have a fairly good cut line in it, but occasionally it gets to a part in the body where it's a little bit faint and you're not 100% sure. Just go around it with a Sharpie. Again, you can clean up all the Sharpie off of it later, and then if you have a protective film on here, just like I said, just be careful with the fine tip that you don't plow through it. But, all that's going to get peeled off anyway, so you can, mark off as much as you want up here and get that done. So now, for sake of argument, we have holes drilled in the body. We have the body rough cut out. Now, when I say rough cut out, I mean you're going to cut it out the best you possibly can and be very, very careful to stay on the line and make nice straight cuts. You don't want to make stop cuts. And what I mean by that is when you're cutting, you don't want to use the entire length of this pair of scissors. You want to start at the back and cut about 3/4 of the way up, and then stop and then slide your scissors back up and then cut again. So when you snip clean through the body, you've now kind of deflected those two pieces, and when you go to start cutting again, you may not start cutting on that perfectly in that perfect same plane, and you'll get this little nub, like a little sharp nub on there. But if you kind of just continually make a cut and cut and slide and cut and slide and cut and slide, you'll get a nice smooth cut. Now, even the best of us cannot get a perfect cut all the way around the body every time. You're going to have sharp corners, sharp edges, and you will occasionally have where two cut lines meet, especially on wheel arches. If you use the score and snap method, basically you're going to cut very lightly around the body in that cut line with a very sharp hobby knife. And then what you'll do is you'll bend it back and forth enough, and then it will get weak, and then you can basically just pop it right in half. It does not take much. You don't have to go over it a dozen times and cut through the body to use a razor knife. And I will get a piece of Lexan and show you real quick. So a lot of times on bodies, you will have excess. Now make sure you have excess. Look in your manual, because sometimes to me it will hide parts in a wheel well. Like, there may be a lens cover or something in a wheel well. There may be an extra bit on the back that has, headlight buckets or something in it. So just make sure that what you have is scrap. So I have a sharp hobby knife. It's not brand new, but it is nice and sharp. And then what you're going to do is follow your cut line with the hobby knife. And again, you're not pressing down on it like you're trying to cut through the body. And in all honesty, you don't want to do that, because when you go through, a lot of times your fingers are nearby. So you don't want to try to forcibly cut through the body. But all I did was put in one little score line. I didn't have to go back and forth over it. And it's a little bit difficult because this is very thick Lexan, and I cut right up to the edge. But now I have folded that over, and then when you fold it back on itself, it pops right off. And you have this very nice, smooth, clean line. I mean, you can feel just a faint bit of roughness where it broke, but this doesn't even need to be sanded. Now, again, when you're cutting Lexan, don't cut through it, because now that piece is deflected and there's a dead stop in there. So when I go to restart, I will try to get a picture of this. So because I made a complete cut and snipped all the way through that, there is the faintest little imperfection in that. Now, this one isn't bad, but then I made 2 or 3 continuous cuts up here with smaller, shorter strokes, and all of that is nice and smooth. Now, it's not 1,000,000% straight, but that's where sandpaper comes in. Some fine grit sandpaper, and that's all you need. That has smoothed it out nicely, and there's no rough edges, and it even got rid of that little bit of a nub back there. And this is 600 grit sandpaper. That doesn't, you don't need 80 grit woodworking paper. So I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place. I'm trying not to. In this video, I'm not going to get this all cut out. This is just kind of an overview of preparing to paint. So I want to get you guys a good base to get confident to when you do start working, and if you do try to follow along for some crazy reason, again, this isn't an exact how-to. This is just how I do it. But the next step is now you have your body that fits the car. So you have your holes for your body mounts, you have all your cuts, you've gotten everything as smooth as you want it, or as smooth as you can get it. All your radiuses are nice and smooth. And if you can, try not to end a cut, especially somewhere like this, where this is like the back of the body. It's hard to see, but I did not end the cuts at a perfect 90-degree angle. The corners are just rounded over just ever so slightly, and that gives you just a little bit more strength in this, because if your corners are a perfect 90-degree angle, so if I stop a cut here and I stop a cut here, well, now there's a very finite end to that cut, and if it flexes, then it wants to crack at that corner. Sorry, I've got a gnat flying around me. If you radius that corner ever so slightly, then what you have is now when that thing flexes, it's not flexing at a point, it's flexing at this arch, and that gives it a whole lot more strength. Eventually it will crack. It's just thin plastic. It's going to get damaged eventually, especially if you drive them hard. But there are things you can do to kind of save it. So one trick is to use a body reamer and start at your corners first and ream a tiny little hole in there, and then cut from hole to hole. And then that way you have a nice straight line, but it goes into the arch, and then it has a nice straight line coming down. But now that you have everything cut out and you have everything sanded, let's go spray it. No. First, you need to go wash this. So it used to be a bigger problem with a lot of, greasy release agent. It was like greasy, waxy release agent used to make these easier to get on and off of the molds when they were producing them. Now, not so much. They have better ways of doing it, and they use a water-based release agent that won't build up a funk on here and keep your paint from sticking. So it's still a very good recommendation to go ahead and paint this, because for the last hour you have been doing this and possibly eating Cheetos or rubbing your nose. Well, the oils on your nose or your face is going to transfer to your fingers. Your fingers are going to transfer to the body, and now you have a fingerprint in here to where if you just start spraying spray paint on here, depending on what color it is, it may barely show up, or it may be the most glaring thing in your paint job. Gunmetal is very, very, very unforgiving with fingerprints and stuff like that in it. So what you want to do first is wash this whole body. And what I do is I just get a good quality paper towel. We use Bounty, not sponsored. And I'll go upstairs in our kitchen sink, put a little tiny, 6 or 7 drops of dishwashing liquid on your paper towel. Get the paper towel good and wet, and then just start scrubbing the whole inside of the body. You don't have to have the water running in it the whole time and, cooking it at like 900 degrees of the hottest water you can get. You don't want to do that. There's a chance you could warp or twist or bend this body in the process of you cleaning it if you're constantly pouring hot water on top of it. So just give it a nice scrub down. Make sure you get in all the little nooks and crannies very well. And then take some nice hot water, hot to warm. Again, you don't want to try to melt the plastic. I don't know how hot your hot water heater is, but rinse it out very well. And then what I'll do is I will actually take that same paper towel that I was washing it with and get out all the soap that I can underneath the water. And then I'll come back in and I'll scrub the body one more time. One, because sometimes, you'll get a spot of dish soap stuck onto the body and you think you've rinsed it all off, but when you go to paint, the paint just goes burp and won't stick to that section because you have a little tiny speck of dish soap on there. So I wash it one time with the dish soap and the paper towel. I rinse the paper towel out the best I can. I'll rinse the body out the best I can. And then I'll come back over the whole thing again and then rinse it out one more time. Set it aside, dry it. I don't like wiping them out with paper towels. I will just set this aside and dry it, or I now have my little air blaster and I can come down here and blast this with air to get it all cleaned out. So now we have a perfectly clean body. Now is the time where you have to put your window masks on and start doing your taping. So for this body, this would be a lot of work because I have 3 window masks and then I have 3 different colors, and each color has to go on at a different stage. So I have to mask off certain areas for different colors to paint. Essentially what you normally do is go dark to light. So this body is going to be 3 different colors. So it's going to start with black, and then it goes to a medium, and it goes to a light. So in this one, I would mask off everything in here that's not going to be black, and then come in and spray the black paint. Get a couple good coats on it, and then you may have to just peel off certain areas of your tape and put your next color on. So then you may have to pull off all of your masking and then remask for the lightest color, and then spray on your medium color, and then peel off your masking, finalize it with your lightest color, and then sometimes you just go back over the whole thing. A lot of times I will go back over the whole thing with a light coat of black just to make it all one color underneath, depending on the paint job. But again, we'll get into the actual cutting out of the body, the masking of the body, all that in the next video. This one is just, again, the overview. Once you have your first masking on, I highly suggest you go back with, a little alcohol white pad. Those little square ones work great for this, and just touch up areas that you can see. A lot of times you can hold it up to the light and see if there's any dust or fingerprint or anything like that on there. A good suggestion is, since you've just washed the body and you've just gotten it dry, don't touch anything. Don't go back to eating your Cheetos or anything like that. Your hands are nice and clean. You just washed your hands, 2 or 3 times by washing this body. So once it's dry, if you have to wait, wash your hands really, really well, and make a conscious effort not to, scratch your eye or rub your nose or, scratch your neck or anything like that. Don't eat the Cheetos at this point. But, get your masking on, and then just double check to make sure that you didn't leave any fingerprints. There's no dust or anything in there. And again, if there's dust, a blower or something, don't use a paper towel. Don't use anything that's going to use lint. If you have to wipe out dust and stuff, get a microfiber towel. You can get these things super cheap on Amazon. I get a thing of 50 of them for like 15 bucks, I think. And then just wipe out any little dust and stuff you have. And make sure you have a clean one. Make sure this isn't something that you rebuilt shocks with a week ago. Make sure you're using a clean one, because any contaminants on this is going to go into this, and then it's going to show through in your paint. Now, painting. Patience is the key. Don't expect to paint a multicolored, multi-segment car in an hour. Just don't. It's not going to come out right. If you have a dark color meeting into a light color, so say if half of this is red and half of this is white, you're going to paint the red on first, right? Darker to lighter, usually. So paint your red on first. You're going to want to let that red cure for 8 to 10 hours to have the best results. Anything, if you try to blast one color, especially white, if you try to blast white over another color, a lot of times you'll have a fade mark in between those two transitions of colors, because you have a nice straight line of red and you have a nice straight line of white, but you're painting that white all over the red, and it will reactivate and soften that red, and it'll just slowly ooze down into your white paint. So I strongly suggest you guys plan ahead and make sure you have time to paint. So again, this is the 3-color paint job. So I'm going to paint the black on first, and then that's all I'm going to do for that day. Or I'm going to do it first thing in the morning, and then I'll come back to it that afternoon or that evening and paint the other color on. And then, we're going to peel off stuff, remask stuff, whatever needs to be done, paint the other color. Then I'm just going to leave that overnight. I'll come back to it tomorrow sometime, and we'll peel off that stuff, mask off, and paint the last color on there, or however many coats you have to get. Now, again, if you peel off your first coat, your first color, and you have little black flecks all over the place, go back to your terry cloth, your microfiber towel, and wipe all those out. Blow it off, do whatever you need to do. Now, if you're using compressed air, be very careful. But if you're using like compressed air, just do it way back here. Don't go jamming it in here. And, you may have one little corner back here that still has a little tiny bit of damp paint, and you're blasting it with compressed air. Next thing you know, you got... So, just wipe out any of those little flecks from your paint that dried up on your tape, and then go about your next things. And then, your painting is done. And then comes the hard part. You know, painting is, you know, can be very tedious. This one is going to be a tedious one because there's a lot of lines and a lot of different colors and stuff going on in the paint job. This one is going to be much simpler. So the paint job on this one is going to go, this is a 1-day paint job. This may be a 2 or 3 or 4-day paint job, depending on things. The decal work, you know, you may sit down for 3 hours cutting out all these decals. You know, you may be able to do it in 30 minutes, depending on how intricate and how close you get to the cut lines. But you may spend 2 or 3 hours cutting all these out in preparation to put them on. And by the time you've done that, you're cross-eyed and you're going to have to come back and put the decals on later. So again, don't rush things. The slower and more methodical you can do all this, then you won't have issues. So this is a prime example of what happens when you rush things. This was intended to be a beautiful paint fade from the gunmetal to metallic purple up to the color shift purple and green. I dorked it all up. It's a mess. And it looks okay from way back there, but I'll get some up close pictures. So basically the metallic gray goes from there to there, then it's metallic purple, and then it fades on into the other. Because I was in a hurry and I sprayed the purple on heavy handed so I get a nice good coat of purple on there so I could get this on, the gunmetal was still not cured. And basically the purple ate into the gunmetal and it just oozed all over the place. So, you know, I painted it and I stuck it so it was sitting, you know, face down. And basically the gunmetal started oozing down and it made a big line all the way across the bottom. It's all splotchy back here because the purple kind of mixed with the gunmetal and it oozed and it shifted. And then I got annoyed with that. So I'm like, screw it, we might as well blast this on. So I blasted this on, and the issue I had up here was the color shift paint. It's almost clear. So basically, it's like a tinted clear pearlescent that you have to back in black. So I blasted that on because it was hard to tell how much I had on there, and I was trying to rush it. So I'm just like, hosing it on. Well, it would have been fine, but I went out to check it. And when I picked it up by the nose, and it kind of pinched out of my fingers, and my thumb, you know, I instinctively grabbed for it, and my thumb went right dead smack in the middle and left a big old thumbprint. Well, I didn't plan on having any decals on here, so I had the bright idea, well, it's still very, very soft and very, very wet. Let me see if I can take a brush and kind of brush it out a little bit. And it kind of worked. So I basically, since I had that big goofy mark in it, I just went around and just started taking the brush and kind of stippling it so it would have like a textured effect. And that worked up here where there was just clear. But back here where it faded into the purple, because the purple got soft with the clear kind of translucent paint over top of it, as I was stippling it, oh, it started mixing the paint colors and pulling the paint off. And yep, like I said, from back there, it looks great. Up here, it's very disappointing. And there is nothing worse than having a brand new built buggy that you had great plans of this beautiful paint job and you had it envisioned in your head and be like, oh man, I've never seen one like that. Everybody's going to love this. And then it turns out looking like Duke. But again, planning and preparation and patience are the 3 main keys for getting a decent paint job. You're not going to nail it the first one. This is probably the 50th paint job. Actually, no. This is probably closer to the 100th paint job that I've done, and I'm still screwing them up. But this one was solely because I rushed it. So, guys, I know this has been a long, and we haven't done anything. We haven't painted anything. We haven't cut anything. We haven't done anything. But I wanted to get you guys a foundation of what you need to think of before you start hacking into a body, drilling holes into the body, laying out your paint, putting tape on, putting paint on. There's an awful lot of forethought and preparation that goes into making a good paint job. And, you know, These aren't elaborate, 17 color paint jobs. And there are guys out there who can, wash a body, throw on some liquid mask, take a razor knife, cut out a cool pattern, spray in and cut and spray and cut and spray and cut. And, I am not that. I will be using tape. Different types of tape, but tape. And we'll go over that in the next video when we actually have the body cut out and we start doing the masking. Until then, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it was a long one. I apologize, but there was a lot I wanted to cover. And, like I said, these are going to be multiple stage videos. But until the next one, guys, everybody out there, you guys be happy, be healthy, be safe, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.